Good morning and good afternoon, everybody. First of all, I apologize that I think because of the sun, half my face is visible, but well, I think it's a good problem to have, so sorry about that. But first of all, well, welcome to today's session of the 2050s Now webinar series. My name is Maria Diaz. I'm the Senior Manager of the FABLE Consortium at Sustainable Development Solutions Network, and I will be the moderator today. So I will start by explaining very briefly the context of this webinar and why we're here today. We're here because we are part of a four-year initiative called 2050s Now, aligning climate action with long-term climate and development goals. It is a project funded by ICI, and it provides governments and in-country research institutes tools and analysis to strengthen long-term low-emission development strategies with a focus on energy and food systems in a way that is in line with development goals and also global targets. So it is a project co-led by World Resources Institute, Sustainable Development Solutions Network, Fundación Bariloche, Institute for Sustainable Development and International Relations, IDRI, the European Climate Foundation, and the National Renewable Energy Laboratory, NRL. So the 2050s Now series, we're trying to bring together experts and practitioners from across the world to share experiences and tools and approaches that can help countries design robust and strong long-term climate strategies. So today, our topic for today is the AFOLU sector. So for those of you who are not familiar, AFOLU stands for Agriculture, Forestry, and Other Land Use, and it's a sector that is often underrepresented in climate planning. And so why AFOLU? Well, it accounts for almost a third of global emissions. It has a dual role in climate change. It's not only a major source, but it can also be a cost-effective opportunity for mitigation and carbon sequestration. So this really differentiates the AFOLU sector from other sectors like energy, for instance. But when we talk about AFOLU, we are not only talking about reducing emissions, we're talking also about people, livelihoods, equity, fairness, and ecosystems. So when we are finding ways to reduce emissions, we are also trying to answer the questions on how can we ensure food security and food self-sufficiency, support rural livelihoods and agricultural production, conserve biodiversity, decrease or safeguard the water use, and address all these interconnections in a way that AFOLU planning is not done in isolation. This requires an integrated approach, and many national climate strategies, like the NDCs, the LTLEDs, not necessarily use that integrated food system approach to address or to propose targets when it comes for AFOLU. So this is why today we're very excited to share with you some of practical examples of how researchers in Ethiopia, in India, and in Argentina are working with governments to try to apply this food system approach in climate mitigation strategies. So who are we here? What are we doing here today? So today we are all part of the Food Agriculture, Biodiversity, Land Use, and Energy Consortium. It stands for FABLE. It's a global network of country research teams working together to develop long-term pathways for sustainable food and land use systems. So the FABLE Consortium is using integrated modeling tools, participatory approaches to co-design long-term pathways with stakeholders to address these synergies, these trade-offs, and really try to come up with an integrated approach that responds to the national context and that also is in line with global targets and global goals, not only the Paris Agreement, but also the Kunming-Montreal Biodiversity Framework and the SDGs. So we are very lucky and very fortunate today. We have three experts. I will just mention them and then we will go one by one. So we have Kalkidan Mulatu, researcher at the Alliance of Biodiversity International and CIAT, based in Addis in Ethiopia, and Kit Saha, research associate at the Center for Management in Agriculture in IMA, and PhD candidate at Humboldt University of Berlin, and Adrian Mongeau from the Department of Complex Systems Analysis at Fundación Bariloche, and also part of the 2050 Now Argentina initiative. So each one of our speakers will present how modeling tools and integrated approaches are being used to inform AFOLU strategies in their countries. We will do 10 minutes each, and then we'll do a panel discussion and then Q&A. So with that, Kalkidan, over to you.
Thank you very much, Maria, for the introduction and for the invitation for us to share Ethiopia's experience. And thank you all that are attending. My name is Kalkidan. I am with the Alliance Biodiversity and CIAT, and I am presenting on behalf of the Ethiopia FEBL team. Going to share my slide in a minute. Okay, good. I hope you are seeing it all. Good. So as said, I'm presenting the experience of the Ethiopia FEBL team, the work that we've been doing across different projects with partners, with national partners, on how to best integrate food and land use systems to also mitigate climate change. So just to put the profile in context, for Ethiopia, agriculture is a very critical sector. It's said to have at least 70% of the labor force employed, and also contributing to 1/3 of the national GDP. But it's also a very core element to our food security, to attaining our food security, especially working on the production and productivity of the agricultural sector. However, the sector is also known to be associated with different environmental issues, especially posing some threats when it comes to deforestation, especially related to cropland expansion on the cost of forested land. It's also the sector is also seen as a major JG emitter. We will also look into that profile, and also relates to pressure on biodiversity and soil degradation, especially related to the livestock sector. But it's also impacted with climate variability, which even makes the cropland expansion and looking for more productive areas even more common. Looking at the contribution that the sector has to the national emission profile, it's as you can see in the first bar chart, in the first pie chart, it's a major contributor. AFOLU contributes to 82.5% of the national emission, and from that, it's mainly the conversion of land from forest to cropland, mainly that amounts the major emissions, followed by livestock emissions. And also when we look at the gases within the AFOLU sector, mainly the emission of CO2 related to land conversion is major, followed by livestock related emissions. So that's why Ethiopia has put the AFOLU sector as a major climate change mitigation element. So the graphs might look a bit messy, but this is also taken from the Ethiopia NDC submitted, the updated NDC submitted in 2021, which looks at the major emitter sections. And so, as you could see in the first graph, historically and also following the business as usual projections, it's the land use and forest sector that's the major emitter, as well as the livestock, right? And when it comes to Ethiopia's commitments to climate change mitigation, both in unconditional and unconditional terms, it's also the one that would contribute most in emission reduction. Of course, under conditional sense, then it will be a net sink than an emitter. but it would definitely contribute to less emission and as a sink when it comes to reduced greenhouse gas emissions. So that's why Ethiopia has put the sector on the front towards ensuring climate resilience and combating climate shocks, but also as a mitigation action and as part of several nature positive food and sustainable production, and also really aligned with the global targets. All our most of our national development goals are also aligned to these global targets. So it's also a critical element, as we're discussing in this webinar as well, for ensuring food security and attaining that nutritional diversity that we envision for the nation. So it's a critical element for ensuring that we end stunting, improve child nutrition outcomes associated with dietary diversity, and also really ensuring that we increase the productivity within the sector. So having this different commitments and challenges in mind, we are still exploring how we can ensure that we're attaining our food goals, so our food security goals, which is a very critical element for the country, with our commitment towards reducing our emissions. So the intent of like what I will be presenting in terms of results and discussions looks at how we've modeled the attaining that production quantity that would help us meet the food security goals, while also both in business as usual and national commitments conditions, and what impact it will have when it comes to the agri-food system indicators. So when we say the agri-food system indicators, we mean how does it affect food security and the dietary shifts? What impact does it have on land use impacts? What impact does it have on our emission potential? And what are the key enablers? Which policy actions are most important in this sense? So once again, the business as usual would mean continuing on the current trends and practices without having influence of major policies and practices. But when it comes to national commitment pathways, we're considering Ethiopia's commitment both on the NDC and LTLEDs, and also considering the food security and climate targets and national commitments. So we used the FABLE approach as a framework. I'm very hopeful that many people are familiar here, but that's what we used as a food system element that could integrate both food, in this case, agriculture, land use, and our nutrition demands. So when we started, our model has the FAO stat database. It's basically, that's what we had as a starting calculator or as a starting database. And of course, we defined our business as usual scenarios as we defined earlier, and what the national commitment pathways would look like under the LTLEDs and NDC commitment scenarios, also considering the food system transformation pathways that the country has set out. We've conducted several stakeholder consultation sessions across the years, across this 3-4 years, sitting together with stakeholders coming from the energy, the land, the biodiversity, agriculture, and food sectors, so different actors within that realm, to define our targets and pathways. And this is critical because we rely mostly on national data. We need that refined national data to further calibrate the calculator, especially looking at establishing national baselines on livestock, diet, and emission factors related to the AFOLU sector. And we did the impact estimation, looking at, in this case, the impact of food production and consumption on land and land use and emissions. And we developed the pathways that that we could explore for optimizing food security while ensuring environmental sustainability. And of course, the step that's ongoing is the dissemination of these findings to the key stakeholders, receiving feedbacks and revising the pathway developments. So within that, the FABLE approach connects all these different dots, the demand side with for food, and the production in the agriculture sector and the associated emission, as well as the policy alignment that's needed within the AFOLU and the food targets as well, and what are the synergies and trade-offs that we would encounter. So looking at the scenario inputs, at least for this case, we had key scenarios, said, especially for the food. We have the total calorie per capita per day, both for the business as usual and the national commitment. We kept it the same because our intention is really to achieve the food target. So in both cases, we're keeping the same target for the food. But when it comes to livestock productivity, livestock production systems, crop productivity, then those also depends on the business as usual and the national commitment using the unconditional commitment and the conditional commitment. And when it comes to practices that would also increase the productivity of agriculture. So we're also looking at climate smart agriculture, regenerative practices, and also looking at, especially for the forest sector, increased afforestation in the case of national commitments and reduced deforestation in the case of national commitments. Looking at some of the key results, we were able to see that, of course, in both scenarios, we've said we'd be able to achieve, we were modeling how we could achieve the required calorie per capita, kilocalorie per capita for the population. And we saw that this could be achieved by 2050 in both cases. But when an interesting shift we've also observed is that there would be a dietary shift to achieve this consumption level, where we see that there will be more consumption of cereals and pulses, more plant-based products, and a reduction in sugar consumption, but also diversification for the protein intake, which is a very critical part of the food system transformation and the dietary guideline for Ethiopia. So not only using red meat, but also relying more on livestock products and other protein sources. And the impact, when we look at the land use, the impact, projected land use change, we could see that under the business as usual scenario, if we are attaining those food security targets or working towards attaining those food security targets, it would mean that we would have to increase our cropland substantially. There will be an expansion of cropland, significant decline when it comes to the forest and pasture land, because that would be expanding on the cost of that, and increased environmental pressure is assumed. But taking into account the national commitments for the sector, if we apply, for instance, increased afforestation and reduced expansion of cropland and reduced deforestation, then we would have our forest significantly increasing, moderate growth in cropland, and that we would have a net negative land use trend. Okay, coming into emissions, it follows a similar trend as before. Because with the business as usual, if we continue to emit, to convert our land, we will have increased emissions coming from the livestock sector and also from the crop. But with the business as usual, we will have the land because of the increased afforestation efforts, which will become a net sink. So that would really decrease the emission projection from that side. Okay, so just wrapping up, what we've seen as key enablers in terms of policy that really ensured this transformation is that when it comes to crop productivity, we will be closing its in our policy that we would be closing the yield gap by 10% by 2050. So it would reduce the food loss or the post-harvest loss, and we would ensure that we will still produce enough food within a given land. The accelerated afforestation is also a critical factor, which would mean that we'll have more sink for our emissions. And also climate smart agriculture ensures that we will be producing using sustainable practices and producing more intensively within a given land, which reduces the need to expand our croplands. And also the increase in livestock productivity ensures that we will be able to meet our food demand, especially for protein, within given fewer animals than the expansion needed. Okay, so when it comes to policy relevance in key takeaways, integrating this food system approach into our NDC. So Ethiopia is producing its latest NDC 3.0, and integrating this food system perspective would make it a smart NDC, really ensuring that we're not neglecting our food security demands. It creates an opportunity really to link sets of data that's really complex and in the hands of different bodies to enable decision making more smart and informative. So really linking science and policy. And when it comes to collaboration between science, but also between different stakeholders, it has been a very important activity for us because it ensures that there are several consultations, there's capacity building and co-development among the teams. But there's also something that we always take and talk about, which is need for data, and this would ensure that we're capturing all the missing links. And for instance, here we're not capturing some elements such as manure management and land transformation, and also like post-harvest loss, which are very critical for
Kidan, we lost you, but I think that I think she was wrapping up. So thank you so much. I think we can perhaps move on to the next speaker, Ankit Saha, who is going to present how they have applied food system approach in India.
Thank you, Maria. I'll just share my screen.
Yes, please go ahead.
But I think Kalkidan's screen is still being shared, so.
I think Eileen can help us with that. Yes.
Okay, perfect. Hope my presentation is visible.
Yes.
Yeah.
Please.
Oh, okay. Thanks, Maria. And again, thanks, Kalkidan, for setting the scene. It helps me with my presentation as well. So I'll be talking about like decarbonizing the AFOLU sector in India, which is one of the most under-researched area when it comes to policies in India. But before going there, I'll just quickly specify like the need for long-term strategies. Since like as we progress, limiting global warming is becoming unachievable, and even with the current indices in place, they are they remain insufficient, and so we need more enhanced mitigation measures. And the idea of like LEDS or NDCs are like to align these short-term actions with long-term ambitions towards a greater common goal. And coming to the profile of India, India is currently the fourth largest economy and the most populous economy. It hosts more than around 17% of the world's population. It's the third largest greenhouse gas emitter with gross emissions above 4,000 million tons as of 2023. But the per capita emissions remain low, at 2.9 tons CO2 equivalent, which is well below the global average. And looking at the sectoral contributions in India, like the energy sector is the major contributor of GHG emissions, accounting for around 70% of the total emissions, like gross emissions, excluding the land use change, and forestry sector. It is followed by agriculture, accounting for 19% of emissions, followed by industrial processes and waste management. Moving on, looking at the AFOLU sector in India. The key agricultural emissions are sourced from enteric fermentation, accounting for more than 50% of the emissions from this sector, followed by soil management and, of course, rice cultivation. The land use change and forestry sector is the only consistent carbon sink. And as in 2020, it was responsible for removing around 522 million tons CO2 equivalent, accounting for 22% of total gross emissions. The major contributors in this sector are croplands, who act as major sinks and account for 67% of the carbon removal, followed by forests, accounting for around 27%. Now, India's long-term strategies or long-term low carbon development strategies are in place, and India submitted its updated last NDC was in 2022, also the LEDS in 2022. Now, India, being a developing economy, faces this dual challenge of economic development and emissions reductions. Historically, India was a minor emitter of energy or emissions, but now with economic growth, the dependence on energy has increased quite a bit, which makes it really challenging for India to move towards a net zero economy. Economic growth and energy consumption appears tightly linked, and which demands for careful policy choices. But the indices commit to 45% reduction in GDP in emission intensity by GDP by 2030, creating additional carbon sinks by 2.5 to 3 billion tons carbon CO2 equivalent, and integrating traditional knowledge for sustainable living, ensuring making space for a holistic approach. The LTLADS aims for net zero emissions by the year 2070, and the development aligned with equity, national circumstances, and climate resilience. Key initiatives in the Indian policy space include this Green India mission, which aims for adding 5 million hectares of forest or tree cover, and improve or restore another 5 million hectares, enhance ecosystem services. There are other national programs in place, like National Agroforestry Policy, and India is also compliant to various global challenges, like the Bond Challenge, which looks at restoring 26 billion hectares of degraded land by 2030, and also in efforts like RED Plus or IHL aligned biodiversity goals. Okay, now when India is set, the concept of India is set, we move on to the FABLE approach. I'll skim through quickly because Maria and Kalkidan have already talked about it. We look at this nexus of agriculture, food, environment, and health, and target several SDGs as we go. The FABLE method is a global consortium, and it's a collective effort of different countries and how we move towards aligning global targets. So it is an iterative process where we go through stakeholder consultations, even internal feedbacks, and to improve our calculations and get it out to the policymakers. Talking about the FABLE calculator, the main method used in this process, I'll keep it as basic as possible. So it's a simple or really comprehensive assessment tool, which first we set the targets. Suppose we are setting the targeted consumption based on the population pressure, and which gives us the amount of livestock production we'll need, the amount of crop production we'll need, and the associated pasture or cropland. And now the constraint here mainly comes as land, because we have limited land, and like taking into consideration the amount of pasture or cropland we need, we look at the feasibility of allowing or that much of pasture or cropland, and we look at if it is feasible to meet the human consumption. And on this way, like we compute various indicators, which we'll look at now. So for the study in India, like we have created 3 pathways. The current trend, which basically looks at like how if things were going business as usual. We look at the national commitments, which aligns like the policies or targets, commitments that are in the policy space according to NDCs or the LT-LEDs. And like we look at a more ambitious pathway going beyond these national commitments and looking for further room for improvement. So like the major differences would be like having a control on the population pressure, like in the national commitments or global sustainability, we account for lower growth of population and higher GDP growth. Food demand is one of the major indicators where we account for like healthy dietary recommendations as recommended by the National Institute of Nutrition. We look at higher crop and livestock productivity, no deforestation post 2030, and in afforestation targets, these are like the main differentiating scenarios for the national commitments and global sustainability. India is committed towards 31 afforestation or restoration of 31 million hectares of land under forestry and tree cover. But we find like we go beyond that and we find that there's a scope of expanding it to 50 million hectares as in the global sustainability. And when it comes to agroecological practices or climate smart agriculture, India is looking towards converting 20% of the current production under organic farming. But we also find like, because there are some trade-offs when it comes to say like the yield penalty, and of course there are different practices which suit different kinds of crops. So we acquire a mixed practice scenario in the global sustainability pathway. So if we look at the results, on the left, we see the difference in the dietary patterns, like the dietary shifts. India has a mostly staple cereal-based diet, where you can see around 50% or more of the diet composes of cereals, mostly rice and wheat. But according to N9 recommendations, we reduce that dependency on cereals and increase consumption of like fruits and vegetables, like nuts, lower sugar consumption, increase pulses, like moving towards a more holistic diet. And when we look at like the kcal consumption, like we meet the targeted requirement, daily kcal requirement, and in both the national commitments and the global sustainability pathways. Moving on, if we look at the land use patterns, we see a significant decline in the dependency on cropland, where there is much more reduction in cropland requirement in the global sustainability pathway by 2050, lower requirement, and since we have like much ambitious afforestation targets, we see more forests by 2050 in the global sustainability pathway. And so like giving us an idea that it is possible to reduce like the pressure on cropland and divert this conversion or like have a change towards like forestry and other natural vegetations. Now, looking at the emissions, we see like the net emissions from the AFOLU sector. Like we can reduce like the emissions by around 450 million tons by 2050 compared to 2020 emissions, which is lower than like the historical emissions in the year 2000 even. On the right, we see like so this contribution is majorly a net effect of like after reduction from agriculture or livestock sector, and also adding to the carbon removal owing to the increased afforestation. On the right, we see like with say a shift in diets or like a shift in the production priorities, and with the incorporation of agricultural practices, there is a significant decline or reduction in emissions from agriculture, as well as like livestock, which is mostly accrued to the change or a shift from animal-based diet to a more plant-based diet. So like building on these results, like we can come towards like a conclusion or like a takeaway. There's for the need of a like a holistic approach. Like when we look at AFOLU sector, it's not just agriculture. It includes all the allied sectors. It includes forestry. It includes like behavioral changes, even inducing behavioral changes. So implementing an integrated or a cross-sectoral strategies, which involves multiple stakeholders, multiple ministries to maximize this AFOLU sector's mitigation potential to put India on a net zero trajectory. There is a need to scale up the afforestation and restoration of degraded lands, as they have been a constant carbon sink, and are alignment with India's long-term low carbon development strategies and NDC commitments. There is a need to enhance agricultural mitigation, where we need a shift towards like more sustainable practices, improving productivity wherever convenient, reducing the expansion of croplands, and like we need innovations in rice cultivation and residue management to reduce agricultural emissions. And also advance demand side interventions, like to encourage shift towards a healthier diet. Like with a change in demand, only there can be change in the production priorities, and we can move towards like a more sustainable future. I'll conclude here. Thank you, Maria. I can move on.
Thank you, Ankit. Thank you so much. And just a reminder for the group, for the audience, you can start writing your questions, and we will address them after. There has been already some interesting topics that have come up, increasing livestock productivity, reducing cropland, promoting shifts on diets, and defining what a healthy diet is. So these are all very sensitive policy topics, and it's very interesting, and we look forward to discussing this in the questions. Adrian, over to you. You will present how this approach has been applied in Argentina.
Okay, can you see my screen?
Yes.
Yes, okay. Thank you. And this is, I am presenting what is a collective work together with Federico, that everybody knows as our modeler. Marcelo Di Blasi is a neurologist. Marcelo Boer is a pediatrician. Gonzalo de Luzarreta is a generalist medical doctor, and Graciela Boretsky is a nutritionist. So this is a team, a branch of our Argentina team, which is called the One Health Hub, or the One Health team. So we did an experiment applying the One Health approach as a way of decarbonization scenario in Argentina. So going to the numbers, being the Argentina in the global context of sustainability, the AFOLU accounts following the national statistics on greenhouse emissions is the total emissions in Argentina from data from 2022 is 400 megatons of carbon dioxide equivalent. The target in the NDC 2.0 is to reach 349 megatons in 2030 as the national compromise. Our 400 megatons is 0.77 contribution to global emissions, which is a low emission in comparison to our role as a country who produce and export food for 400 million people. Our per capita emissions is almost 9 tons per capita per year. And from our calculations, to be sustainable, global sustainable, we need to go down to 2 tons per capita. This is important to compare with India and Ethiopia, because we need to reduce 75% our emissions if we want to be sustainable citizens, which is a lot. In terms of AFOLU, we have 100 megatons for agriculture and livestock, and 74 megatons for other land use, which goes for 166 megatons of emissions, which is about almost 40% of the total. So in this graph, we can see 50% is energy, 39, almost 40% is AFOLU, 5% is garbage, etc., and other 5 is industrial. So the AFOLU accounts by gas. You can see here in the graph that this is the total. The biggest in energy. This is the contribution of AFOLU in terms of carbon dioxide, but the contribution of AFOLU in methane is the big one. Here is mostly livestock, and nitrogen oxide also is AFOLU is the main emitter of this kind of gases. If we analyze the AFOLU emissions in total, we can see here in the center of the circle that from the total of AFOLU emissions, 23% is cropland, 77% is livestock. From this 77%, 74 of this 77%, 74 is enteric fermentation. From this enteric fermentation, most, 73.4, comes from beef production. So it's mostly cows going to beef, and a small part, 7% is dairy production. So we can see here that the main issue in terms of AFOLU emissions is the beef production. The famous Argentina beef production is the main driver of the AFOLU emissions. So this graphic depicts a cultural gastronomic behavior, a cultural way of producing in Argentina. And going to this second question in this presentation, if Argentina have an emission reduction target only for AFOLU, the answer is no. The emission reduction target, which remember is reaching 349 megatons of carbon dioxide equivalent in 2030, is a general goal. The commitment is not divided by sector because the sectors doesn't want to charge with the responsibility of a cap and trade number. So it's a general commitment, not without an assignation of a quote per sector. The sectors didn't want to even hear about a number per sector. But if we make a linear calculation, considering that AFOLU is 38.3% of the total, this equates to a target for AFOLU of 133 megatons as a goal to reach the NDC 2.0 in a linear way. But the sectors, when we talk with stakeholders, the energy sector is expected the follow part of the problem as a carbon sink to offset emissions from other sectors by carbon sequestration. The energy sector is expecting that AFOLU will sink 100 megatons of carbon dioxide. What we as a AFOLU team, we said, no way. We can even reach decarbonation by our own, so we cannot account for minus 100 megatons for as a carbon sink. So this is one of the big trade-offs we have in Argentina. Going to trade-off and challenge, we need to understand that reducing AFOLU emissions implies, among other things, among other very complex things, a change in Argentina's food culture. So what we did is to ask pediatricians and nutritionists to prepare a healthy diet for children from 0 to 18 years old as a criterion scalable to adults. So if it's good for children, it's good for adults. But we think in children because for several reasons. One is because people, at least in Argentina, believe in pediatricians. What a pediatrician said to a mother, to parents, say, okay, this is the truth, this is good. And also people believe in school teachers and do not believe in politicians, for instance. We analyze first in which narrative people believes, and the pediatricians and school teachers are on top. So, okay, we ask pediatricians and nutritionists to prepare a healthy diet for children. And one of the main recommendation was to reduce the daily food intake per capita calories from almost 3,000 kilocalories per day to 1,800. So I saw the presentation of Ethiopia, and I think we will have a very nice debate about it, because at least our Argentine Society of Pediatry, or our pediatrician, thinks that a low-calorie intake is better for health than having 2,500 kilocalories per day. So the first recommendation was to reduce the kilocalories per day up to 1800, which, well, it is a lot, but it's related, it's linked with indicators of health. And of course, the diet composition is in this recipe is changed, includes meat, includes lots of cereals and fruits and vegetables, but includes red meat in a lower amount in comparison to the current diet. So this is our experiment. What if all the people in Argentina follow the medical recipe? What will happen with the model? So we, when I say we, is I am saying Federico, run the favor calculator model and see what happened with our diet, which we call GAPA 180, 1800, because GAPA is the guide for food for Argentine people, but reduced in calorie intake. So in comparison to the current diet, our GAPA 1800 proposal, we can see here that gain almost 50 million hectares in terms of other land. And in terms of share of total land that's supported by biodiversity conservation, we are gaining also a lot, but in comparison to the current trend, to the business as usual. If we correct the sustainable pathway with our GAPA 1800 dietary shift, the results are much, much better. So we can gain lots of other land for other uses. And you can see here in this graph that the consumption of meat is going down from now to 2050, and we have, because this is a sustainable pathway, we have sequestration by new forest. So what we are seeing here is that just changing our dietary culture, we can gain a lot in terms of land available for other uses, including, of course, biodiversity conservation, carbon sequestration, water protection. And the idea now, if we are gaining lots of new land for other uses, of course, the market can say, okay, but we can use this for produce more food and export more food. But we can also say, okay, but we need this land for to expand our adaptation targets, to our carbon sequestration targets, biodiversity conservation, and ecosystem service goal. The question is, okay, but what is the optimal spatial location for the area gained through the GAPA 1800? So we made a visualizator in which we can select priorities in this part of the screen, select the amount of country surface we can use for the model. We put here in this example 30% in order to link the Paris Agreement with the Kunming-Montreal Agreement. And then we can see here that our first priority is the red one, followed by the orange one, which is the second priority, the third priority, the fourth priority, in which we can orientate the stakeholders or decision makers to see, okay, this is the best way for you, decision maker, to expand the area following the land that is gained by our proposal. So this is one of the Federico's graphics in which we can say the difference between the current trend, which is the red one here, the sustainable trend, which is here, and the GAPA 1800, which is, we are not reaching zero emissions by 2050, but we are reaching almost net zero in following the GAPA. If in the future we add agroecology as the way to produce this GAPA 1800 food, we can improve better our results. So we did using the dynamic model the progression each 5 years to how to reach the goal of our best AFOLU solutions. Most of the, if we see here, 2050, this part of the country, which is pasture for livestock, in 2050 is other land. Is most of the land we recover is in that part of the country. So when we go to stakeholder engagement, we showed this several times, that when we did a consultation to the sectors, the business as usual scenario was the politically and economically viable for the sectors, but of course it's unsustainable for climate and environmental goals. Our carbon neutral proposal is the ideal scenario from our point of view, because it's sustainable in climate and environmental goals, but has little consensus in the mapping of actors. So this is our main challenge. So how can we convince the sectors to be sustainable, to go from the business as usual, which is the consensus, to the carbon neutral? And for this, and just ending my presentation, the great challenge here is that the problem of decarbonization by 2050 must be solved from the roots of the dominant civilization paradigm, which is the driving force of the current trend, with major interdependent conflicts that share a common objective. The common objective is in the center, which is mostly the Sustainable Development Goals, and we can put here the 3 Rio Conventions, the Paris Agreement, the Kunming-Montreal Agreement, and the Certification Convention. So all the world is have an agreement, a common ground here, because our national commitments, but are crossed by lots of conflicts that we cannot solve yet. For instance, between the politically correct and the ecologically possible, which is exactly our problem. So we model an ecologically possible trajectory, but it's not politically acceptable. The problem between the global targets and the local ambitions, a problem, an academic problem between social science and natural science, a philosophical controversy between the concept of price and the concept of value, and of course the I here now driving force against the common future. We here are, this is a philosophical model, mostly a language model, and we are using here the theory of color, the one developed by Goethe, which show opposite colors when there is a conflict. So we are thinking about it. We are trying to use this palette of colors to map, to map the conflicts in our models. But I think this is a synthesis which is not only for Argentina, is for other countries. And in my opinion, if we cannot solve these conflicts, will be very difficult to achieve a long-term strategy from now to 2050. Okay.
Thank you, Adrian.
That's it.
Thank you so much. Thank you for sharing that experience with us. I had a few questions for the speakers, and I also see that there are a few in the chat. So actually, one of the chat is one of the ones that I wanted to ask, and because I think each one of you has presented different contexts and challenges and necessary changes in different aspects of the food and land use systems to achieve the climate mitigation goal, and then food security, ecosystem, biodiversity protection, etc. And one of the questions from the audience is, how can food security, biodiversity, and emission reduction be balanced in integrated land use planning using fable systems specifically? So this is very complex, and I know this will require probably a full day, but if each one of you, let's focus on necessary changes or policies that should happen in your country based on your analysis to achieve this balance. What would it be? So who would like to start? Maybe Kalkidan, if you're still there? I don't see you.
I'm here.
Yes.
Okay. I will turn on my camera. Yeah. So, this is quite an interesting question. Thank you for the participant from Pakistan, if I'm not mistaken, for raising it. And it's something that we often discuss as well in all of the consultation meetings for a country like Ethiopia, where we actually do lack a land use planning map or a land use planning document. We hope that the trajectories that we're trying to show would inform the land use planning strategy that the country envisions to create, because most of the trade-offs, it's already happening within the AFOLU sector. So between the targets we have between biodiversity, between forest, between crop production, and having that having some of these results coming out from FABLE showing how we can attain sustainable production and productivity without, for instance, expanding cropland areas into forest land, that's already a guide of how we could design our land uses. So we would see it as an informative tool to really help map the land use process. And maybe, for instance, what Adrian was showing, more like producing that spatial map from the FABLE exercise, that's also something that we hope to do to inform this process. Thanks.
Good, thank you. Ankit.
Yes, thank you. And building on building on Kalkidan's answer, it's so there needs to be like an alignment of like various sectors. Like when we talk about food security, biodiversity, and agricultural productivity, we are not talking about just one policymaker or one group of policymakers taking this decision. Like what needs to come together is like the alignment of their targets. Like, so there might be an increase in demand for, say, cash crops or like commercial crops for export purposes, which might not favor, say, biodiversity conservation. And again, like taking away land from, say, forests, but integrated approach where these different ministries or different sectors come together, have a discussion to have a common goal can facilitate this change, I feel.
Adrian, would you like to complement?
Yes. Putting together food security, biodiversity, and the other one was what three? Food security, biodiversity,
Agricultural product, mitigation.
agricultural production. Okay, okay. This is optimization problem. So we can run our model of optimization, asking for the best spatial solution for the three goals at once. For instance, selecting forest recovery, which increased pollinator biodiversity or seed dispersal biodiversity, will increase food security because will increase ecosystem services in the neighborhood of this kind of intervention. And if we increase productivity, we will increase food security. But in modelistic terms, is an optimization problem. We put the three goals in the optimization model, and the model will select the optimal places to reach the three goals at once. But this is in mathematical terms. In philosophical terms, we need to build a new economic paradigm to put together the three things, which is a huge effort. We need to change the way we are.
Thank you, Adrian. Yes, and then this leads me to one question I had because, and I think, Adrian, you touched upon on it a little bit on what is, well, maybe the phrase is politically correct is not necessarily, but we have certain recommendations that models and our findings suggest that this is the way to go, and we demonstrate how this is biophysically possible. But we cannot isolate ourselves from the economic and social reality, right? In the case of Argentina, Adrian, you were talking about food culture, but also I guess that there is a big economic argument behind it, behind the beef industry and the livestock sector as well. I guess it's the same with India when we're talking about reducing cropland, like impact how this can impact farmers' organizations and their livelihoods. And I guess in Ethiopia, it's a little bit the same as well, you know, building the case of afforestation and not cropland or livestock or pasture expansion. It is a difficult conversation to have, even though numbers say that it's possible. So with this context, I wanted to ask each one of you, you have all used modeling tools and you have engaged with stakeholders. So what has been the main challenge for you in your engagement with the governments or policymakers or even other kinds of stakeholders? What has been the biggest barrier for you to engage them in your scenario design? And which stakeholder group you haven't been able to work with yet and you think it would be useful and you would like to? Kalkiran, you want to go first?
Thank you, Maria, for the question. So Okay, so trying to tackle the question one at a point, but also it gave me something to think about. Of course, we're talking about a much like the modeling, it's more optimistic. We're using data that's, for instance, for Ethiopia, that's based on conditional scenarios. So, you know, our projections are also quite ambitious. And putting this into practice whenever we speak with with the stakeholders, we find it interesting because I mean the targets and the projections are there, but for instance, when you want to start with a baseline data, that's often missing, and that's something that we always like. For us, most of the stakeholder consultations are really about creating that baseline and seeing how that is very much off to, you know, the ambitious scenarios that we're setting. Is it realistic? Is it not? So that's the main discussion that we often have. Most of our stakeholders are, of course, government counterparts, knowledge centers, and policy advisors. And we've had very successful sessions, but there's always that limitation about evidence and data and to start with. Another one is also often stakeholders have high expectations. Like for instance, when we're talking about this synergies and trade-offs, it expects maybe for the tool to solve everything, or like for us to model everything and try to find solutions for all. And the issue for us is often that finding reliable data and finding reliable estimations, that's really an issue for us. And as to a stakeholder that we are yet to engage, it's mainly the private sector, I would say. And I mean, our private sector, when it comes to food and land and, you know, agriculture, it's a small part, but we assume that they will have a big role to play in the coming 20, 30 years. So when we're making that projection, we're leaving out the private sector and the impact they would have in the sector. So yeah,
Thank you,
that's my
Kalkidan.
take.
Ankit?
Thank you, Maria. And also, like one problem that we also face, as Kalkidan mentioned, is the availability of data, and that we do create this modeling exercises or our assumptions or optimizations in our computers. But again, getting it out and like bringing about change is a much difficult task than it seems. For like India in specific, like there is a decentralized approach where like even if there is a national level policy space like directing or setting targets, like the action or like it is taken on a much granular scale, coming to subnational and like, you know, even to like the third level of governance in panchayats. So like we also have our subnational calculators to look at like a performance of a state and looking at avenues of how they can improve. But again, like what we get is like uh, getting say the Ministry of Environment to like look at like find ways to like, you know, restore more lands and like restrict deforestation, and also at the same time like getting the Agricultural Ministry to focus more on targeted intensive agriculture and like increasing productivity without spilling over towards more agricultural cropland expansions. And like the main thing, like as we found out, like dietary changes, like getting people to move towards like a healthier diet, like saying that these might be difficult, like these are not good for you, your health, or the environment's health in general. Uh, is like a collective effort, and that needs to happen simultaneously. So the challenge becomes to get all of these actors in the same room and getting them to act on a like similar path or move towards a similar path is a major challenge that we face. And given in India, like since our major emissions sector is energy, like a lot of priority or focus is shifted towards that sector, and like getting them to like getting the general consensus that, okay, this is the only sink that you have, like this is the only way you can remove like excess carbon, is still far-fetched. So like we wish to get there, and we wish to inform more policy makers, but yeah, like slow, like it's only at a slow and steady process. Yeah.
Thank you, Ankit. Adra, you want to comment?
Yes, I think at least in Argentina, one of the big trade-offs is that our narrative, which is sustainable decarbonation, to simplify, is not politically represented. So we have no senators, no deputies fighting for this narrative. And for instance, the energy sector and the livestock sector and the agricultural sector has lots of warriors in the political battle to impose their narratives. And we do not exist in the political arena. This is one of the main things. Our narrative is not represented as a political alternative. So this is the main issue. So we need to build a political narrative to fight in the political arena with other sectors. This is one thing. And the other thing is we were naive and arrogant when we build our models and saying, okay, this is our perfect biophysical model, and you need to follow this or go to extinction. And our alternative cost $185 billion to be implemented, period. So it's a huge, it's 60% of our, how do you say, IPB? Yes. So it's
PP.
Yes. It's lots of money to do the transition to sustainability, and it's not profitable. But it is difficult to convince people that yes, but the business as usual is profitable, but we are going to a disaster. But the I here now is a predominant force against the common future. So this is the main trade-off. We need to change. So it's a philosophical crisis. The idea we have is to work with provinces, decentralize the province, and to work with sectors. Go sector by sector and model together and see what we can do from the bottom up.
Thank you so much, Adrian. So I think that what is interesting, and I see a little bit from the group and the audience, is that there is some empathy on the data gaps, data standardization and integration. Definitely some challenges in the policy and the translation of scientific findings into policy implementation. One thing that we are trying to do in the 2050s Now initiative is to bring closer this research to climate mitigation strategies, like the planning, the update of NDCs and LTDs. And one way has been through collaboration with the NDC partnership. So in the case of Ethiopia, for instance, the team has been working closely with the government in this political process. And Argentina and India have engaged with different actors at different scales, subnational scales particularly, because sometimes there is bigger chances to have some policy impact, and it's just more feasible. So I would like to, one last question, and this could be a quick one, would be what is next for you? So you have your results, you have been engaging with governments. Could you share a little bit with the group what's next in terms of dissemination, political engagement, refinement of results, or any other? Kalkidan, quickly, you, and then Ankit, and then Adrian.
Thank you. Yeah, so this process has been going on in different projects, but the one that you just mentioned, Maria, especially the engagement with the government, with the Ministry of Planning and Development, we've been received warmly in terms of integrating, especially the food system as part of the NDC. There is evidence, there's need, of course, to show that this is evident, this is important, and we would be communicating like the very final modeling results with the government. And so that's like the stakeholder validation, consultation part once again, and hear back, get feedbacks and update or revise as needed, and make it really a co-development process as well. That's what we're hoping for.
Ankit?
Yes, so like as we speak, like our next would be to expand our reach as much as possible. And as of today, like Vartika from our team has indulged the Odisha government and other state government to get a buy-in and look at their problems. And like we'll be working towards another subnational calculator as soon as possible. And we are also engaging other community level organizations where, for example, like one thing that is currently in place is a program called My District, My Plate, which kind of looks at like sustainable diets, localized diets, which which keep in mind both human health and environmental health in the process. And so the idea would be like, since to expand our reach to all these different states and like have different state calculators and informing like state calculators, like states separately, and also like trying to get some action, like some behavioral change and like informing and awareness on the ground level towards like, as Adrian mentioned, like the bottom-up approach. So yeah.
Adrian?
Next is to work with the sectors, work with the school teachers because the kids today are the adults in 2050. So we will try to have incidents in schools. Also, we're experimenting our dietary shift proposal and work at a subnational level with the provinces. This is our next issue.
Oh, great. Okay. So, well, I would like to thank Adrian, Ankit, Kalkidan for your time and sharing your experience. And I would like to thank the group, the participants today, for all your questions. This is, we tried to capture in an hour and a half what can be done with integrated modeling tools and food systems approaches in different countries. Of course, there's so much more. And if you want to learn more, that we have, the FABLE Consortium has a website, fableconsortium.org, and you can see a little bit the results and the kinds of analysis that our experts have been performing, not only with FABLE tools, but other models as well. And I think the conclusion can be that this is a conversation that needs to take place more and involve more actors. Ministries of health hardly speak to ministries of agriculture or ministries of environment. So when we're talking about reducing emissions, we cannot just work with one sectoral actor, and especially because of the implications that it has on the economy and the livelihoods. So thank you, everyone, and thank you to our donor, IKI, the German Climate Initiative, who has been supporting 2050s now. And we wish you a very good day. Thank you so much. Thank you, everyone.
Thank you, everyone. Bye.
Thank you, Maria. Thank you, everyone.